The sound of shattering glass cut through the birthday celebration at the Bennett estate. Every head turned. Ethan Bennett, 15 years old, only son of a billionaire, was convulsing on the marble floor, his lips turning purple. "Call 911, someone screamed. Guests scattered, some dialing, others searching frantically for medicine. No one noticed the girl pressed against the doorway. Lila Moore, 13, the housekeeper's daughter. Her eyes locked onto the smoothie bottle Ethan had just emptied. There, on the tiny label at the bottom, a faded line of text no one else had seen. "Stop! He's allergic to peanuts," she cried out. The room froze. A child had just read what dozens of adults had missed. But before we continue, make sure you're subscribed and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. We'd love to know how far our story has traveled. The Bennett estate stood like a fortress in the hills of Connecticut, all glass and marble and impossible beauty. Everything inside whispered money. The kind that doesn't just buy comfort, but erases problems before they're even spoken. Lila Moore had lived here for as long as she could remember. Not in the main house, of course. She and her mother Grace occupied a small room tucked behind the kitchen, where the scent of fresh bread mixed with lavender detergent every morning. Grace had worked for the Bennetts for over a decade. She knew which coffee Mr. Bennett preferred on rainy days, how Mrs. Bennett liked her towels folded, and that Ethan's peanut allergy wasn't just serious, it was life-threatening. Lila's routine was simple. Wake at 6. Help her mother prepare breakfast. Then retreat to their room where she'd study online using a second-hand tablet held together with electrical tape. No fancy tutors. No private school uniforms. Just her, a flickering screen, and borrowed Wi-Fi. She loved science most. Not the theoretical kind, but the practical observations. The way ice melted differently depending on surface texture. How certain plants grew toward specific light wavelengths. Details most people rushed past. Ethan used to notice her too, back when they were younger. Back when a billionaire's son and a housekeeper's daughter could build blanket forts in the library without anyone raising eyebrows. But time changed things. As Ethan grew, so did the distance between their worlds. He attended elite academies. She studied in a room that smelled like industrial cleaner. He had birthday parties covered by society magazines. She served appetizers wearing her mother's old apron. Still, Lila never felt bitter. Her mother taught her that work had dignity, that service wasn't shame. "We take care of people, Lila," Grace would say while scrubbing countertops at midnight. That's worth something. Henry Bennett rarely spoke to them directly. He was a man who communicated through assistants through emails forwarded 3 times before reaching their intended recipient. Power had made him efficient, but distant. Yet Grace never complained. She'd raised Lila alone after her father left when she was 2. This job meant stability. A roof. Health insurance. A chance for Lila to maybe someday study at a real university. Lila understood this without being told. She made herself small, invisible. She learned to read a room the way she read her science texts, carefully looking for patterns others missed. Like how Mr. Bennett's left eye twitched when quarterly reports disappointed him. How the head chef got sloppy when stressed. How Ethan's breathing changed slightly when his allergy medication was wearing off. These observations were her superpower. Not X-ray vision or super strength, but the ability to see what happened when people stopped performing for each other. The mansion had 72 rooms. Lila had counted. 72 spaces designed for perfection, for impressing guests, for proving that Henry Bennett had conquered not just business, but life itself. But Lila knew something the architects didn't. Perfection was exhausting. It required constant maintenance, endless vigilance. One crack in the facade and everything could crumble. She just never imagined she'd be there when it did. The night before Ethan's birthday party, Lila helped her mother prepare guest rooms. Fresh flowers in crystal vases, Egyptian cotton sheets pressed into geometric precision. Every detail calibrated for admiration. "Big day tomorrow," Grace said softly, smoothing a pillowcase. "Mr. Bennett wants everything flawless." Lila nodded, noticing how her mother's hands trembled slightly. The pressure of perfection didn't just rest on the Bennetts. It fell on everyone who kept their world spinning. "It will be Mom," Lila assured her. "It always is." She believed it then. She believed the Bennetts' money could buy safety, that their resources could prevent any real disaster. She wouldn't believe that much longer. The garden transformed overnight into something from a magazine spread. White tents billowing in the breeze. String lights woven through oak branches like captured starlight. A jazz quartet playing near the fountain. Photographers positioned at calculated angles to capture only the best moments. Henry Bennett wanted this party to make a statement. Not just wealth, but taste. Not just success, but legacy. Ethan's 15th birthday would be remembered, discussed, envied. Everything must be perfect, he'd told his staff that morning. Clean, flawless, zero margin for error. The guests arrived in luxury cars that purred rather than roared. Business partners, society families, people whose handshakes could move markets. They moved through the space like dancers who'd rehearsed their steps, complimenting everything with practiced enthusiasm. Ethan stood at the center, uncomfortable in his tailored suit. He smiled for cameras, thanked guests for gifts he didn't need, played the role his father had written for him. But Lila, watching from the kitchen doorway, noticed his shoulders were tense. He kept touching his medical alert bracelet, a nervous habit from childhood. The new chef, Nolan, had been hired specifically for this event. He came with recommendations from Manhattan restaurants, a social media following, and an ego that filled the kitchen like smoke. "I've created something special for the birthday boy," he announced, blending ingredients with theatrical flair. "A protein smoothie. My signature recipe. Guaranteed energy, completely organic, perfectly balanced." Grace watched nervously. "You checked the allergy list. Ethan cannot have any peanuts. Not even traces." Nolan waved dismissively. "I'm a professional. I've fed celebrities with far more complicated restrictions." The smoothie emerged a vibrant green garnished with mint and served in a crystal glass that caught the afternoon light. It looked healthy, expensive, Instagram-worthy. Nolan himself carried it to Ethan during a lull in conversations. "For the man of the hour. This will fuel your next chapter." Ethan accepted it with a polite smile. The kind that said thank you without meaning it. He raised the glass, took a long drink, while guests applauded this small, meaningless moment. For 30 seconds, nothing happened. Then Ethan's hand trembled. The glass tilted. His face flushed red, then pale, then something worse. "I can't," he gasped, clutching his throat. "I can't breathe." The world seemed to pause, then explode into chaos. The glass fell shattering across stone. Ethan collapsed, his body convulsing. Guests screamed. Someone knocked over a table. The jazz quartet stopped mid-note. "Call 911, Henry roared, dropping to his knees beside his son. "Someone get his EpiPen now." Staff scattered like frightened birds. The head of security was already on his phone. The family doctor, attending as a guest, pushed through the crowd with his medical bag. "What did he eat? What did he drink?" the doctor demanded. "Just the smoothie," someone answered. "Chef Nolan made it special." Nolan stood frozen, face drained of color. "There's no peanuts. I swear. I used almond milk, spinach, banana protein powder." Lila had been clearing plates near the garden entrance when she heard the crash. She pushed through the panicking guests, her heart hammering. She saw Ethan on the ground, saw the broken glass, saw the terror in her mother's eyes as Grace tried to help, but didn't know how. And then she saw it. The smoothie bottle. Chef Nolan had left it on the prep table, half empty. Lila's eyes locked onto the label the way they always did when reading anything. The tiny print at the bottom barely visible unless you were really looking. "May contain traces of peanuts." Time crystallized. Sound became distant. All she could see was that one line of text, small enough to miss, significant enough to kill. Her voice cut through the chaos like a knife. "Stop. He's allergic to peanuts." Every head turned toward her. A 13-year-old girl in an apron pointing at a bottle most people hadn't noticed. "What are you talking about?" someone snapped. Lila ran forward, grabbed the bottle, held up the label. "Here, look. The protein powder contains peanut traces." The doctor snatched it from her hands, read quickly, then swore under his breath. "She's right. This is anaphylactic shock. I need the EpiPen immediately." Within seconds, the injection was administered. Ethan's convulsions began to slow. His breathing, though labored, started to regulate. The ambulance sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Henry Bennett stood slowly, his expensive suit rumpled, his face ashen. He looked at Lila as if seeing her for the first time. A child had just saved his son's life. And he, with all his money and power and preparation, hadn't seen the danger until it was almost too late. The ambulance lights painted the mansion red and blue as paramedics carried Ethan away on a stretcher. His breathing had stabilized, but his skin remained pale, his eyes unfocused. Grace held Lila close as they watched from the kitchen entrance, both silent, both shaking. Henry Bennett rode in the ambulance, his phone pressed to his ear, already mobilizing specialists, calling in favors, ensuring his son would receive the best care money could command. The party ended in whispers. Guests departed with concerned faces and eager gossips, already crafting their versions of events for tomorrow's society circles. The beautiful setup remained now haunted by scattered glass and overturned chairs. By midnight, word came from the hospital. Ethan would survive, but it had been close. Terrifyingly close. Henry returned at 2 a.m, his tie loosened, his face carved with fury and fear. He gathered the entire household staff in the main dining room. Every person who had touched food preparation. Every person responsible for his son's safety. Someone will answer for this. His voice was low-controlled, more dangerous than shouting. My son nearly died in our own home, at his own birthday party. Someone brought peanuts into this house despite explicit documented instructions. Chef Nolan stood at attention, sweat beading on his forehead. Mr. Bennett, I followed every protocol. I personally checked every ingredient. There were no peanuts in my kitchen. Then explain the label, Henry snapped. Explain how a protein powder with peanut contamination ended up in my son's drink. I used what was provided from the supply closet. Everything in there is supposed to be pre-approved, pre-screened by your food management team. Henry turned to Marcus, the household manager. Is this true? Marcus nodded, pulling out his tablet. Sir, every item in our inventory is documented. I can show you the approved list. There are no peanut products, no items with peanut warnings. Everything is certified safe for Ethan's allergies. Then how did this happen? Henry's fist came down on the table. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Silence fell. People exchanged glances but offered no answers. Lila stood at the back of the room with her mother, trying to remain invisible. But her mind was racing, replaying what she'd seen. The label. Something about it had seemed wrong beyond just the warning itself. May I see the bottle again? Her voice came out smaller than intended. Every eye turned to her. Some annoyed, some confused. One child interrupting serious adult business. Henry's gaze softened slightly. You saved my son. You can ask for whatever you need. The bottle was retrieved from where the doctor had left it. Lila took it carefully, turned it under the light, studied the label the way she studied everything with complete attention. This label, she said slowly, running her finger across it. The warning at the bottom. It's not the same ink as the rest of the text. Marcus leaned closer. What do you mean, look? She pointed. The main label is professionally printed. Clean edges. Uniform color. But this warning line may contain traces of peanuts. It's slightly smudged. The ink is different. Darker. And there's a pen indentation under it. She held it at an angle. In the right light, you could see the ghost of pressure, like someone had written over the original text. Someone changed this label, she said quietly. After it was printed, the room erupted. Accusations flew. Nolan protested his innocence. Marcus demanded to see the original invoice. Henry stood silent, his mind clearly calculating implications. I want the supplier contacted immediately, Henry ordered. I want the original product specifications. And I want fingerprints taken from this bottle. Grace squeezed Lila's shoulder, a warning to step back, to not get more involved. But Lila couldn't let it go. Mr. Bennett, she ventured. May I check the storage area where the protein powder came from? Why? Because if someone changed one label, they might have left evidence. Or changed others. Henry studied her for a long moment. This girl, barely a teenager, was showing more investigative instinct than his entire security team. Marcus, take her. Show her everything. The storage room was immaculate, organized with military precision. Every container labeled, every shelf inventoried. Marcus pulled up the delivery logs on his tablet while Lila examined the shelves. She found the protein powder box tucked behind newer stock. Pulled it out. Checked the shipping invoice taped to the side. There it was. The original invoice clearly stated, peanut-free certification included. But someone had crossed it out with a pen different ink-shaky handwriting and written, may contain traces in its place. She photographed it with her old tablet hands trembling. Who received this delivery? She asked. Marcus checked his logs. It came in yesterday afternoon. Chef Nolan signed for it, but the inventory check was done by… He paused, face going pale. By Nolan himself. He initialed the safety verification. The pieces were falling into place, but Lila's instincts told her something still didn't fit. A chef wouldn't deliberately poison someone at their first major event. The risk was too high, the motive too unclear. We need to check his background, she said softly. And we need to know who else has been in contact with him since he was hired. Marcus stared at her. You think this was planned? I think someone wanted this to happen, Lila replied, and they made sure Chef Nolan would be the one who delivered it. Henry Bennett stood in the doorway, having followed them down. He'd heard everything. Call the police, he said quietly. And get me everything, every phone call, every message, every person who's had contact with Nolan since we hired him. He looked at Lila with something between respect and disbelief. A child is solving what my security team missed. What I missed. His voice cracked slightly on the last word. Morning arrived cold and gray. News of Ethan's collapse had already leaked to tabloids. Headlines screamed about negligence lawsuits, the fall of the Bennett empire. Henry's phone hadn't stopped ringing since dawn. At 8 o'clock sharp, he summoned every staff member to the main hall. Not just kitchen workers this time. Everyone. Gardeners, drivers, security, housekeepers. Even Grace and Lila standing near the back, barely visible among the crowd. 2 police detectives flanked Henry, their presence turning speculation into official investigation. Someone in this house altered a product label. Henry's voice carried across the marble floor. Someone knowingly introduced a deadly allergen into my son's food. This isn't negligence, this is attempted murder. Gasps rippled through the assembly. People shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting to neighbors, wondering who among them could have done such a thing. I want to know who, Henry continued. I want to know why. And I want to know now. Silence. The kind that pressed against eardrums and made breathing feel intrusive. Chef Nolan stood rigid, his confidence from yesterday completely evaporated. Mr. Bennett, I swear I had nothing to do with altering any labels. I used what was in the storage room. I trusted the inventory system. Your fingerprints are all over that bottle, Detective Morrison stated flatly. Of course they are. I made the smoothie, but I didn't change any label. I didn't know about the peanut contamination. The detective held up an evidence bag containing the protein powder container. This invoice was tampered with. The original certification was crossed out and replaced. The handwriting analysis will take a few days, but we can expedite fingerprint results. Lila felt her mother's hand tighten around hers. Grace whispered urgently, Don't say anything more. This isn't our place. But Lila couldn't stop seeing the details in her mind. The smudged ink. The shaky handwriting. The way the pen had pressed too hard, like someone nervous, rushed, or being forced. She stepped forward before she could second-guess herself. Mr. Bennett, may I say something? All eyes turned, some annoyed, many dismissive. A child interrupting again. Henry nodded slowly. Go ahead. I have the photograph I took last night, of the altered invoice. She held up her battered tablet. The handwriting. It doesn't look like someone trying to hide what they were doing. It looks like someone who wanted it to be found eventually. Detective Morrison frowned. What makes you say that? The pen pressure is uneven, inconsistent, like the person was conflicted or being watched, and they left the original text visible underneath. If you really wanted to poison someone and hide it, you'd replace the entire label, not just scribble over it. Murmurs spread through the crowd, some skeptical, others thoughtful. An older woman near the front, Patricia, who'd worked for the Bennetts for 20 years, spoke up. With all due respect, Mr. Bennett, should we be taking investigative advice from a child? Other voices joined. She's just trying to help her mother keep their jobs. She probably doesn't even understand what she's talking about. Lila felt heat rise to her face. Her mother pulled her back gently. "That's enough, sweetheart. Let the police handle this." But Henry held up his hand. "No. I want to hear her evidence. My son is alive because she paid attention when none of us did." "Continue, Lila." She swallowed hard, then pulled up the photo on her tablet. "The ink used to alter the label is ballpoint pen, blue. But all the official inventory paperwork uses black gel pens. I saw the supply closet yesterday. Every pen there is black gel." Detective Morrison leaned closer to examine the photo. His partner did the same. "She's right," the partner murmured. "That's definitely ballpoint, and that shade of blue is common in cheap disposable pens, not the kind you'd find in a luxury estate's supply closet." "So someone brought their own pen," Henry said slowly. "Someone who didn't have easy access to the house supplies." Nolan's face went from pale to ashen. I have a blue pen in my chef's jacket, but I use it for personal notes, grocery lists. I didn't alter anything." "We'll need that pen," Detective Morrison said. "And your phone. Now." Nolan handed them over with shaking hands. While the detective examined the pen, his partner scrolled through the phone's messages. "Mr. Bennett," the partner said after a long moment. "You're going to want to see this." She turned the screen toward him. A text message thread. Recent. Encrypted messaging app, but still accessible. "Change the label. Make it look obvious enough to cause panic, but not so obvious you get caught immediately. $50,000 on completion." Nolan's response: "I can't do this. This could kill someone." Reply: "Your choice. But your gambling debts won't disappear, and certain people are getting impatient." The room erupted. Accusations, shock, anger crashing together like waves. Henry's voice cut through it all. "Who sent these messages?" The detective worked on the phone, tracing the number. "Unknown sender. Burner phone." But the messages referenced specific debts to a casino group linked to the Castellano family. Recognition flickered across Henry's face. "Castellano. My competitor for the Harborview development contract." The pieces assembled themselves. A rival businessman. A chef with gambling debts. A deliberate sabotage disguised as negligence. All designed to humiliate Henry, to make him look careless, to destroy his reputation before a major business deal. Nolan collapsed into a chair, head in hands. "I didn't want to. They said it would just cause a scare. They said no one would actually get hurt. They said the paramedics would be there, that it was just to embarrass you." "My son nearly died," Henry said, his voice barely above a whisper. Somehow that was more terrifying than shouting. Detective Morrison handcuffed Nolan. "You're under arrest for attempted murder and conspiracy." As they led him away, Henry turned to Lila. She stood small and uncertain, suddenly aware that her words had just changed everything. A child saw what trained adults missed. He said not to her, but to everyone. A child trusted her eyes and her instincts while we trusted our assumptions. He looked at Grace. At Lila. Really looked, perhaps for the first time. "I owe you both more than I can say." 3 days passed before Ethan was released from the hospital. His color had returned, his breathing normal, but something in his eyes had changed. He'd stared at death close enough to feel its cold breath. Henry brought him home in the middle of the afternoon. No fanfare. No photographers. Just a father helping his son up the front steps, moving slower than necessary, as if afraid sudden movement might shatter this second chance. Lila was helping her mother fold laundry in the service room when she heard them arrive. She didn't plan to intrude, didn't expect acknowledgement. She was just relieved Ethan was home alive, safe. But an hour later, Grace received a message from Marcus. Mr. Bennett requested their presence in his study. Both of them. Grace's hands trembled as she smoothed her uniform. What if he's sending us away? What if all this attention made things complicated? "Mom," he said, "we saved Ethan. Sometimes gratitude and comfort don't align, sweetheart." They walked through corridors that suddenly felt longer, more imposing. Grace knocked softly on the study door. "Come in." Henry stood by the window, backlit by gray afternoon light. Ethan sat in the leather chair, looking smaller than usual, a blanket wrapped around his shoulders despite the room's warmth. "Grace, Lila, please sit." They perched on the edge of the sofa, uncomfortable with this unusual formality of being invited to sit in the main house. Henry turned from the window. His face looked older somehow, tiredness carved into lines that expensive skincare couldn't erase. "I've spent 3 days thinking," he began. "About what happened. About what almost happened. About how close I came to losing everything that actually matters." He paused, collecting himself. "I built an empire on attention to detail, on seeing opportunities others missed, on being 10 steps ahead of everyone else. And yet in my own home I was blind." Ethan spoke softly. "Dad, let me finish." Henry's voice cracked. "I was blind to danger, blind to the people around me, blind to the fact that security isn't just cameras and guards. It's awareness. It's caring enough to actually see." He looked directly at Lila. "You saw what dozens of trained, educated, well-paid adults didn't. You read a label we all looked past. You noticed inconsistencies we dismissed. You asked questions when everyone else accepted easy answers." I read carefully," Lila said quietly. "My mom always taught me to pay attention." Henry turned to Grace. "You raised her alone?" Grace nodded. "For 11 years now, sir. On a housekeeper's salary, while working long hours, while ensuring she received an education. She's a bright girl. She deserves every opportunity." "She does," Henry agreed, "which is why I've made some decisions." He picked up a folder from his desk, but didn't open it yet. "Ethan asked to speak with you first, Lila." The boy looked up, his eyes meeting hers for the first time since they were children building blanket forts. "I remember when we used to be friends," Ethan said. "Before I got too important for that. Too busy with the right schools, the right friends, the right image." His voice wavered. "You saved my life. You didn't have to. You could have stayed quiet, stayed safe, stayed invisible like everyone expected. But you didn't." Tears spilled down his cheeks, surprising everyone, perhaps himself most of all. "Thank you. For seeing me when it mattered. For caring enough to speak up." Lila felt her own throat tighten. "You're welcome." Henry cleared his throat, clearly struggling with his own emotions. He opened the folder. "Grace, you've served this family with loyalty and excellence for over a decade. I'm tripling your salary effective immediately. I'm also providing full health insurance with no deductibles and establishing a retirement account in your name." Grace's hand flew to her mouth. "Mr. Bennett, I don't know what to say." "Say nothing. It's long overdue." He turned to Lila. "And for you, I've established an educational trust fund. Full tuition to any school you choose. Undergraduate, graduate, medical school if you want it. Plus a stipend for living expenses, books, whatever you need." Lila stared, unable to process the words. "I spoke with Dr. Reynolds at Connecticut Science Academy," Henry continued. "She's willing to review your application for immediate enrollment. Full scholarship, of course, separate from the trust. She was impressed by what I told her about your observational skills." I don't... Lila couldn't form complete thoughts. "You have a gift," Henry said firmly. "A mind that sees what others miss. That gift saved my son. It might save others someday. And I'll be damned if I let it waste away because of circumstances you didn't choose." He stepped closer, knelt down so he was eye level with her. "Not everyone does the right thing when it's hard, when it's scary, when speaking up might cost them everything. But you did. And that tells me more about your character than any test score ever could." Grace was crying now. Quiet, overwhelmed tears. Henry stood, extended his hand to Lila. Not as an employer to an employee's daughter, but as one human being to another. "Thank you," he said simply, "for being brave enough to see, and brave enough to speak." Lila shook his hand, feeling the weight of gratitude, opportunity, and second chances all pressing against her small palm. Outside the study window, the rain that had threatened all afternoon finally began to fall. But inside, for the first time in years, the Bennett house felt warm. Autumn painted the Connecticut Science Academy in shades of gold and crimson. Lila walked across the quad carrying an armful of biology textbooks, her new backpack still strange and wonderful bouncing against her shoulders. A year had transformed everything and nothing. She still woke early, still helped her mother sometimes, though Grace now had a team and took actual days off. Still read labels, carefully noticed details others rushed past. But now she did it surrounded by people who celebrated that instinct rather than dismissed it. Her phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. "Presentation today, right? You're going to crush it. Remember to breathe." She smiled. They texted often now. Not the awkward reconnection of forced gratitude, but genuine friendship rebuilt on honesty. He attended regular school across town, but they met for coffee on weekends, studying together like they were making up for lost years. "Thanks. How's the college prep going?" "Terrifying. But I'm actually reading all the safety information now. Every label, every warning. You created a monster." "Good," she typed back. "Stay safe." Her biochemistry professor, Dr. Chen, caught her before class. "Lila, your paper on allergen detection methods was exceptional. Have you considered presenting it at the Student Research Symposium?" "I'm only 14, Lila said automatically, "and already thinking like a scientist should. Age is just data. Insight is what matters." That afternoon, Lila stood before her class presenting her research on improving food label visibility. She'd designed a prototype system using color-coded allergen warnings large enough to be seen clearly standardized across all products. "Current labeling allows for too much variation," she explained, pointing to her slides. "Small print, inconsistent placement, easy to miss when you're tired, rushed, or trusting someone else to check. We can do better. We should do better." The class asked questions. Real ones. Challenging ones. And she answered them, her confidence growing with each response. After class, she found a message from Henry Bennett. "Ethan told me about your presentation. I'd like to hear more about your labeling proposal. I'm meeting with FDA consultants next month. Your voice should be in that room." She read it twice, still not quite believing this was her life now. Walking home to the small house Henry had helped Grace purchase in a quiet neighborhood, Lila thought about all the things that had changed. The safety. The opportunities. The future that had opened up like a door she hadn't known existed. But also what hadn't changed. Her mother still worked for the Bennetts, though now as head of household operations, managing others rather than scrubbing floors herself. Lila still visited the estate weekly, often studying in the library where she and Ethan once built blanket forts. Sometimes she'd catch Henry watching her with an expression she couldn't quite name. Gratitude, yes. But also something like wonder. As if she'd reminded him that wisdom didn't always come with age or money or power. That evening, Grace made dinner while Lila finished homework at their small kitchen table. Real plates, now not plastic. A table they owned, not borrowed. Windows that looked out on a garden Grace was learning to tend. "How was school?" Grace asked the same question every parent asks, made precious by how long she'd waited to ask it in circumstances like these. "Good. Dr. Chen wants me to present at the symposium, and Mr. Bennett wants to include me in his FDA meetings." Grace turned from the stove, eyes shining. "My brilliant girl. I always knew you were special. I just didn't know how to give you the chance to show it. You gave me everything that mattered, Mom. You taught me to pay attention, to care, to speak up even when it's hard." "I taught you to survive," Grace corrected gently. "Mr. Bennett gave you the chance to thrive. But you, sweetheart, you did the saving. You saw what needed to be seen. That was all you." Later, alone in her room, her actual room with a door that closed and shelves for her books, Lila opened her laptop. She'd been writing an essay for class. The prompt, "What moment changed your life?" She stared at the blinking cursor for a long time. Then she began typing. "The moment I chose to speak when staying silent would have been easier. The moment I trusted that what I saw mattered even though I was just a child, just a housekeeper's daughter, just someone no one expected to have answers." She paused, smiled softly. "That's when I learned that courage isn't about being fearless. It's about being afraid and speaking anyway, because some truths are too important to stay silent about."